Bizarre Reality Media.
Bizarre Inquiries with Shayn Orin.
Welcome, Bizarre Rights and Inquirers, to Bizarre Inquiries, the show where we start with a clip, article, or inquiry and let our minds wander. I am the original Shane Squatch, the big bad. Oh, fuck, I already fucked it up. I am the one that some refer to as Shane, aka the original Shane Squatch.
I am delivered!
And alongside me, as usual, I have the big bad Boo Daddy himself, Sir Orin Felix.
So bang bang, skeet skeet.
Hey, that's the first time I messed up on the intro coming in, so I guess it was overdue at this point.
So two things. Number one, you're trying to steal my nickname, which I don't approve of. And number two, is that the I am delivered, like the I don't like men's no more? Yeah, that's like my favorite YouTube video ever.
It's been a while since you've heard that one. I think I messed up the dynamic a little bit today, because if you notice, my hat's a little bit different, so I kind of look like Tim Pool today. So I was in that Tim Pool mindset, so I totally fucked myself up coming in. So not only am I stealing your name, I'm also stealing Tim Pool's look. So it's a good start to the show, I guess.
Just plagiarizing all over the place tonight, aren't you?
Hey, well, I guess, we kind of got to do that, at least to some extent, in order for the show to work. But it's under the, fair use. That's how we make this show work, at least, for at least the YouTube algorithms. So under fair use, right? It's a parody.
All right, keep telling yourself that.
Yeah, I'm going to keep telling myself it, because that's the only way at the end of the day that I'm not going to feel guilty for stealing other people's stuff, stealing their looks. But aside from stealing, considering that, we didn't actually get a chance to mention it on the last show, I wanted to throw in that it was belated birthday to Sir Orin Felix over here. So happy birthday. I don't know how old you are now, maybe like 56 or something, but since we didn't get a chance to say it on Bizarre Encounters, I figured I'd say happy birthday on Bizarre Inquiries.
Well, thank you, first off, and you're not far off. I'm 36 going on 56, so you pretty much nailed it.
Hey, what's the general rule? Once you hit 50, you start counting back down. So, hey, you'll be 36 again eventually.
If I make it that long.
Cross your fingers.
Or not.
In this crazy world we live in, you never know. Well, I guess kind of bringing it into what we're going to end up getting into today, talking about crazy world, I guess it's a perfect thing to lead into the first thing we're going to get into today. So I didn't exactly know how to fully portray this, but it was something that weirdly enough kind of came after our last conversation that we had with Trey Hudson, talking about the Montauk Project and getting into the whole multi-dimension theory. So I want to kind of continue on with that, get into a realm of conversation pertaining to this. But first I have to start at least, and I'll kind of get into it a little bit as I play some of the clips on what kind of inspired this besides Trey Hudson. For anybody who may not be familiar with this book over here, I ended up getting to this last week. It's called Flatlands, A Romance of Many Dimensions. And basically the premise of what this book is supposed to be is that it's told from the perspective of a square in a two-dimension reality. And he ends up having like this entire thing where he explains like how the two-dimensional reality works, how they're able to interact with each other, like their viewpoint on how they perceive and how they go about their reality. And so he ends up having a dream and he goes into a one-dimension reality. And he's trying to explain how the two-dimension reality works to a one-dimension reality being. And of course, that concept absolutely makes no sense. So he's like, all right, whatever, he gives up. And he ends up, waking back up in his reality. So he ends up later on, he's sitting there talking to his wife, and this three-dimensional object ends up appearing. Considering they're in a two-dimensional reality, everything's like flat, and this thing ends up coming in, and it's a sphere, but he doesn't recognize it as a sphere because he's not aware of what a sphere is. So it comes into their reality, and it looks like it just appears because they don't understand that it's coming from, like that outside perspective. So they see it and they assume that it's a circle because they're looking at its shape from that two-dimensional perspective. And so he starts trying to explain to them how a third-dimensional reality works. And he starts trying to say like, hey, I can see you guys from the side, because in their reality, all the different shapes that interact with each other, they have to learn how to tell shapes off of different lighting angles and things like that, because they can't see from the side to actually like perceive. So the way that he ends up perceiving it is, I can see like inside of you guys, but once you get pulled back into this reality, then you'll also be able to see my perspective. But I guess I'm going to put this on hold temporarily for a minute so we can start kind of building up on this concept. But the first clip that I wanted to share was kind of explaining the perspective from multiple realities. And then, yeah, we'll get into the weirder stuff, but bring up the first clip here.
All right. So first off, all that sounds like the most That 70s Show sitting in the circle ideas I've ever heard in my fucking life. Like, it runs on water, man.
Dude, it's fascinating. You know what's weird, though, is all these books that have such weird, mind-boggling concepts are all, like, this book was written in 1884, and this dude's talking about, like, multi-dimensional perspectives of things, and it gets weirder as we go in, and you'll kind of get into the philosophy behind it, but, dude, some of the best stoner books came from the late 1800s where people weren't even smoking yet like that.
This dude was, like, fucking out of his mind on opium and absinthe and whatever else they did back in the 1800s.
Well, I mean, it was in England, so at least they had the opium den, so I can at least vouch for that. I know Alice in Wonderland and other books around that time were created because of opium den, so I wouldn't be surprised. It definitely shows. But getting into some, that 70s Show mind-bending stoner type talk, let's get into this explanation of realities and how they could possibly function.
Dimension is just a simple line that connects 2 points and has only length. The second dimension is a square. To make a square, take 2 lines and move them apart at right angles in the second dimension and join the matching ends of the lines together with other lines. Now, this flat shape has only 2 dimensions, length and width. The third dimension is a cube. To make a cube, you take 2 squares and move them apart at right angles in the third dimension. Then join the matching sides of the squares together with other squares. The cube has 3 dimensions, length, width, and height. The fourth dimensional shape is also known as a tesseract or a hypercube. Now, to make a tesseract, take 2 cubes and move them apart at right angles in the fourth dimension. Then, join the matching faces of the cubes together. Our brain cannot comprehend this object the same way a 2D species would not be able to perceive a 3D object.
See, and this is where stuff starts to get weird now. So hopping back into a little bit of like what they end up talking about in the book. So he ends up taking the square to the third dimension reality. And when he's in the third dimension reality, he starts kind of explaining how these things function. And of course, it's confusing, but he at least kind of gets like a basic concept on how these things function. So in the process of this, he's like, hey, how come, we aren't aware of you in the second reality? How come, you guys don't make yourselves relevant and known in this reality? And so they say, we try to, but you guys end up quieting us. So they end up going into like the main room where everybody's talking and chatting about politics and everything. And they just appear into this reality, of course, because they're coming from a third dimension perspective. And essentially all the priests and all the high up people decide that they want to hide this whole concept. So then after that, the square ends up basically becoming, for lack of a better term, like an apostle almost, where he starts sharing this thing that he calls the gospel of, let me bring it up. I made sure I got some notes on this one. He calls it the gospel of 3 dimensions. And he starts going around trying to explain this to people. And he starts trying to explain how this concept could possibly work. And he starts trying to like break it down so that it could be a little bit more simple. And in turn, of course, he ends up getting like prosecuted for this type of stuff. So it ends up being this like broader perspective where this is kind of where I wanted to bring it into here. On the last show, we were kind of talking about towards the tail end, the whole concept of, like the Holy Trinity, that you have this like physical thing that's here. You have this thing that kind of exists in this ethereal plane. And then you also have this thing that kind of exists everywhere all at once. So for me, at least, and I want to get your perspective on this, and we can get more into like the concept of like fourth dimension reality. But it almost kind of seems like this book, one, is almost trying to be like a parody for religion. And that it seems like the whole concept that we've been talking about for a long time about a lot of these religious figures actually being something that's fourth dimensional or even higher than that seems to be this concept that kind of pops up through time. And it almost kind of seems like it's almost somewhat repressed because just like in the book, it's like the whole story about it basically shattering people's perspective of reality if they actually know that the next dimension up fully exists. Because if you kind of believe in it in theory, then it's a lot different than if it's practical and something's actually coming into your reality. Because at that point, I mean, you almost might potentially lose free will if you know that something else is possibly manipulating your reality from above. But I guess I'll let you throw in some of your thoughts before we get even deeper into this. But
yeah, I mean, just right off the rip, it sounds like, this is touching on, like you said, a lot of things we talk about on the show. First off, this idea that forces or things or entities, whatever you want to call them, from a different reality, space-time continuum, whatever you want to call it, can bleed into our reality, can, pierce the veil and come through. I mean, where I stand on this. I think that is kind of at the root of a lot of paranormal and high strangeness activity. I mean, I've said on the show before, something as simple as, people say, well, why have we never discovered a Bigfoot carcass, or what does the Loch Ness monster eat? If you look at things like that as, if there's this pinprick in the veil and these things are only in our reality for these brief moments in time, or when a certain set of circumstances, allows it, it makes it where you don't have to answer those type of questions. So, like I've always said, if you just entertain the possibility that, hey, there could be weirder things going on out there, it becomes, at least in my case, a lot easier to believe some of these kind of zany, esoteric, or out there ideas that we talk about on the show. And, I'm not saying all of this stuff is 100% correct. And yes, I believe 100% all of this, but, a lot of it, I think there's a lot of validity to, and it's at least fun to think about,
Yeah, exactly. Because it could completely explain the whole concept on why these things appear to be able to step out of reality.
Mm-hmm.
It may not necessarily be that, there's like a portal or anything like that in particular, but rather that they're viewing reality from a different perspective. And of course, you have, a lot of people that theorize that the next dimension up would be time.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever would be existing in that dimension would essentially be able to step out of time and then step back in, which, if you're thinking about it from that perspective, I mean, totally fits the whole motif of Sasquatch. I've been seeing these things all through time. Even some of the Raven Mocker / Mothman, or all these like weird things that kind of pop up through pockets throughout time. It may be a fact of, if that is the next dimension up, it is time itself. If they just step out of time and they have this perspective that we don't necessarily have, it may not be that, Sasquatch is been existing all through time necessarily, but rather that they're stepping back and forth into fixed points in time, as weird as that sounds.
Well, I think what's interesting about that is, if we're operating under the assumption that the next dimension up, the fourth dimension, is time, even in our dimension, time, we pretty much know, operates in a very different way than we kind of perceive it and are led to believe. It's not this linear A, B, C, D type process. It's a lot stranger than that. And so if you were to go up a dimension in theory, I mean, how much stranger would it appear, for, us mere humans at that point? So, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, if we are to assume that time is the next dimension, and I think there's a lot of validity to that, I mean, like you said, it would be like this, 2D thing looking at this 1D thing. We'd have no idea what we're looking at. And I think that kind of gets back to something you've said before with like shadow people and things of that effect, mm-hmm. where, your brain might not be able to process the information that's actually there, whether that be like, light spectrum type shit or whatever. And so you kind of
appear
just
flat too.
Yeah.
So it could be like that dimensional perspective too.
Yeah. You kind of just fill in with your brain, and it fills in this, darker than dark, blacker than black shadow figure.
See, this is where it starts to get even weirder, because time seems to be like the one that everybody kind of puts some stock and validity behind as the next dimension up. Mm-hmm. But in this book, they also kind of share this concept that I was also kind of onto. The whole thing that they say that the next dimension up, they believe, would be this dimension of thought. That's basically how they describe it. Because it appears that as you're going back dimensions, this is going to be hard to fathom, again, because we're third dimensional going into a fourth dimension, but it appears that from that perspective, you can see inside of whatever's in that other reality. So when you're looking at a line and you go into 2D, you can see it from the side, so you're able to see the inside of everything. When you go into that third dimensional reality, like I was mentioning with the two-dimensional reality, you're looking at everything from the side, so you can see the inside of things. So if that continuation kind of goes on, and you get into the whole concept of like the Tesseract, for example, which is the cube inside of a cube, it's almost like an unfathomable thing, but the next dimension up would be this perspective where essentially you could see inside of whatever our reality is, whatever way you're able to perceive that. But it's almost like an inconceivable concept of like, what would the inside of our reality look like? But I feel like that would be the next perspective up. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily time. I almost think it's like this next step going in, like this astral plane possibly might be more of like a better explanation of what the fourth dimension up might possibly be.
Well, first off, I was kind of going to hit on that kind of concept as well. But before I do that, it kind of sounds, from the movie Interstellar, At the end of it, where he's like in the bookcase closet dimension or whatever, and he can kind of see through to all the different dimensions and points in time. Kind of sounds similar to that in a way. But yeah, piggybacking off your point, if you go up a dimension, theoretically, and you're looking at time in this very esoteric, non-linear way, at that point, what's the difference between consciousness or time and like, Akashic record type concepts? I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense that, this idea that all things exist at all times. Like at that point, to me anyway, it seems like there's not a whole lot of difference between time and consciousness.
Yeah, see, that's where I'm kind of getting into the fact that I don't necessarily think time is the next step up. I think it's a matter of this next step going inside. Because even when you're kind of looking at it from that perspective, I mean, even with like astral projection, for example, you can see like inside of somebody, so to speak. You get this also different perspective where you're almost like looking at reality from like a different perspective too. Like you're almost like outside of time itself, which again, kind of a weird thing to fathom, but it might be multiple things all at once that you go inside. And by going inside, you get outside of the physical reality and then you go inside of like time itself. But I got a few more other clips I wanted to possibly share on this, but it seems like there's this kind of back and forth between the whole concept of time and going inside. But I think that is the trick. It's just a matter of, again, it's unperceivable from our perspective, but we can understand these two basic concepts that clearly go together in order to kind of explain this. But here, let me bring up the next one here. There it is. And I got one more clip after this one too.
Okay.
Look at this piece of wire. Now, from very far away, this wire would look like it's one-dimensional. In that, for instance, if a little ant was living on it, you'd say, well, it can move left and right along the wire, but that's it. There's only one possibility. But then as you get closer to the wire, you realize that there's a second curled up circular dimension, the circular girth of the wire. Right. And therefore, our microscopic ant can not only go back and forth, it can also walk around the wire, a second curled up dimension. Now, what the idea is, according to string theory, is that the fabric of the universe is much like this piece of wire, and that there are the familiar dimensions that you refer to, left, right, back, forth, up and down, and also time, but there can be additional dimensions that are tightly curled up like the circular girth of the wire, and are so small that we haven't seen them yet, because we don't have sufficient magnifying instruments to actually peer down into the nooks and crannies of the spatial fabric and see these extra dimensions. Look at this.
See, but this is going back into the idea of what we're kind of saying. It's this mixture of being inside of our reality, but also mixed with time itself. Because I think time clearly only exists within our third reality physical dimension. So once you go outside of that, it'd be no different than us drawing a line in a 2D reality.
First off, how many more times was that guy going to say circular girth? That really did it for me. That was fucking hilarious. But yeah, I mean, kind of like we said before, like if you go up a dimension theoretically, like however we in our puny little human brains perceive time or anything outside of our 3D plane, I mean, it would make perfect sense to me, like I said earlier, that like whatever we perceive it as is just a drop in the bucket of whatever is actually going on there.
And it'll never be something that we're able to perceive, which again gets into this whole idea that I think that there's a lot of truths hidden in the Bible, which I've been saying for a long time. And the more that I've been diving into this stuff, like nobody really understands the Holy Trinity, it seems like. It's more of like a concept that everybody's like, oh, it could mean this, it could mean that. But I'm starting to believe that it's basically trying to explain something that's existing in the fourth dimensional reality from a third dimensional perspective, because we can't perceive the fact that something can be everywhere all at once, which would be the inside. It's also in this ethereal plane, so it's in that other plane, but it's also able to be physical in our reality, which is almost like when the sphere comes into our reality and they get this perspective of like a circle. So go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I'm obviously not a theologian, not a Bible scholar, but I have heard on various like podcasts and, reading articles and whatnot, that the idea of the Holy Trinity in, like fucking cosmic, in a cosmic timeline, I guess we'll say, is like a very new concept. Like this is not something that like ancient peoples believed, this idea of the Holy Trinity, and it came about later. So maybe it did come about as a way for people to understand and explain and kind of humanize these kind of broad reaching, bizarre concepts.
Yeah, because it's a matter of language. Like we've said a million times, like, first of all, that people of that time weren't as advanced as far as like theoretical astrophysics go, for example. So like thinking of trying to explain something like that, what not a better way to explain it? That it's here in our reality, it's also in that reality, but it's also everywhere all at once. They can see inside of everything. Like that sounds like exactly what they're trying to explain with the whole third reality coming into the second reality, just again going up another perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we always say, more than one thing can be true at the same time.
Exactly. So I also want to bring up this last video. This is also, what's his name? Michio Kaku. I've seen him a bunch of times, astrophysicist. I don't even know if I
He's
pronounced his
on
name
like
properly.
Ancient Aliens all the time.
But this is supposed to be like one of the best explanations of how the third dimension reality works. So just for the sake of bringing it up from somebody that's a little bit more qualified, I might as well bring it up.
Well, Einstein says the fourth dimension is time. So if you want to meet somebody in Times Square, you say, meet me on 42nd Street, 5th Avenue, 10th floor at noontime. So it takes 4 numbers to specify lunch in Manhattan. But we now believe there could be other dimensions, perhaps as many as 11 dimensions. And we hope to test these ideas with the Large Hadron Collider.
What's the fourth?
As, of course, we got to do a little bit of a tail end with the Hydrogen Particle Collider, because obviously we know they have a lot of different things they're actually trying to do with that. And it seems that one of them is opening portals / getting into these other dimensions or realities. But yeah, fascinating way to explain it with the whole concept of, basically having to say time with height, with all of that stuff, like with Times Square. I think that's probably one of the best analogies that I could think of for at least what we kind of attempt to perceive as the fourth reality.
Well, and talking about the Hadron Collider and opening portals and things of that nature, that is a perfect segue into my topic if you don't have anything else to add to this one.
No, I think it should be about good, man. We can wrap it up and head into yours. Perfect segue. So let's gotta bring some music.
Yeah, we got to take those natural segues when we can get them. But anyway, so for all you listeners out there, Shayn had told me he was going to kind of do like a kind of heady, out there topic for his topic tonight. So I thought I would do something a little more lighthearted and kind of topical and pop culture, but also kind of touching on the bizarre. So we're going to talk about some of the inspirations for Stranger Things. I'm sure a lot of you guys, like me and Jenny, just binged the part 1, volume 1 of the last season of Stranger Things this past week. So I thought
it's all October's been talking about too. So
exactly. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about this. So the article I've got comes from a website called outeast.com. And it is titled Stranger Things in the Hamptons, the story of the Montauk Project. And this article was published on October 30th of 2018. But even though it's a little older article, it's still very topical. So unless you got anything else, Shayn, I'll go ahead and jump into this.
Hop right in, man. Project Montauk is always topical. It doesn't matter when it is, what it is. Like, I'm always down for it. It's like MK Ultra, dude. All you got to say is the word, and I'm down. Let's talk about it.
No, I figured we'd have a lot to unpack with this one. All right, so getting started. When you think of the hit Netflix series Stranger Things, you probably think small town Indiana, which is natural since the show is set there. But what you may not know is that the show's original working title was Montauk. Why? Because the show is based in part on rumors surrounding the Camp Hero Air Base and events there that remain shrouded in mystery, located in, you guessed it, Montauk, New York. Since virtually all knowledge of this incident has come from word-of-mouth interviews, it's hard to dig into what happened and to know where the truth lies. But in honor of the spookiest day of the year, we wanted to give you some quick notes on the story, along with some Halloween reading to help you dig further. You just might get a new campfire tale out of it.
All right. I love the little spoofy things I got to throw in there here and there.
Where did it go down? Anyone who spent a fair amount of time in Montauk has probably stumbled on the urban legend of Camp Hero State Park. Located at the far eastern tip of Long Island, this network of paths and campgrounds is actually pretty pleasant. It's the large, severe-looking remnants of an Air Force base and its giant antenna towers, complete with a huge concrete slab that says, "Do not enter this building," which serve as the chief fodder for local mischief and spooky retellings. Feel free to stop by if you want. The base is located just about in the dead middle of the park. But be warned that if you go into any of the gated areas or sealed off edifices, you will be trespassing. So what actually happened? The story goes like this. Back during World War II, the U.S. Navy allegedly conducted experiments, to which it's never admitted, attempting to use supernatural or psychic means to make ships invisible to radar. This spawned a group of 1950s conspiracy theorists who speculated that these experiments opened a wormhole and caused an entire battleship to disappear. This bit of lore is known as the Philadelphia experiment. And where did the ship go? Well, a wormhole in time to the 80s, apparently. And that's exactly when another linked psychic experiment took place. It was called the Montauk Project. So, Shayn, I know you've done some research on the Philadelphia experiment. Is there anything you'd like to add before we kind of jump into the next section?
Well, I guess just for the sake of it, I'm sure everybody's kind of heard about the Philadelphia experiment, but just for like a quick run over for everybody, essentially what this was they were trying to run an experiment where they could see if they could essentially pass this ship through time itself, through reality, and appear somewhere else.
Well, wasn't it under the guise of like trying to develop technology to make ships where they couldn't be detected on radar?
Yes, exactly. That's what it was. And they ended up using something that it was some type of like giant magnetic battery, which goes into some weird stuff that we talked about a bit earlier with these portals opening, which I think we dived into that episode, using these magnetic rings possibly to actually use that to transport through. But essentially what happened is they kicked this thing on, this thing disappeared, showed back up along the coast way farther down, and where it was showed up along the coast, there was people that were like merged into the ship. There were people that just were going crazy, like they couldn't fathom what they had seen. So I mean, it continues on with what we were talking about in the last thing. You know, did these people see the fourth dimension and their brain just could not perceive it to the point where it basically just drove them mad instantly? Because even the other thing, if you're stepping outside of time, this may have just been a quick flash for, Project Montauk, or for this project that it went from, this location to this location. But who knows how long they could have been trapped inside of that.
Yeah.
Not to mention, while they were trapped inside of that, they were possibly even seeing their friends, colleagues get morphed and fall into the ship itself because the physical reality wasn't existing the same at that point. But really, really, really weird project. I don't know if there's been any paperwork that anybody's discovered about it, but it seems like with a lot of these black projects, they kind of purposely leave them in folklore, and it seems folklore-y, but once you start really diving into the whole concept of CERN and how the hydrogen particle collider works and everything, you quickly start to realize that this story lines up and that the technology clearly is a predecessor of the hydrogen particle collider.
Yeah, for sure. So just kind of rounding out some of that, like you said, this experiment was performed on a ship called the USS Eldridge, and it took place at the Philadelphia Navy shipyard. So that's why it's called the Philadelphia experiment. And like you said, the ship disappeared and it reappeared in Norfolk, Virginia momentarily before reappearing in Philadelphia. And like you said, that's when the crew was like fused into the walls and the hull of the ship.
See, and that kind of, weirdly enough, we were talking about the next dimension seems like it would be inside of this reality because you should be able to see the inside of things from the next step up, even getting into the Tazarek thing. So if that is the case, I mean, that would totally make sense on why people morph into things. If you're not intended to be in that reality, but you can see that perspective of the inside of things, like I said, I think it's all there. It's just a matter of we can never fully fathom it because our brains aren't intended to, but all the pieces are there,
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that matter would behave totally differently when you move up a dimension or going through these wormholes or portals or whatever you want to call them. But
I mean, I feel like almost in the fourth reality, you could exist within something. But the problem is when you come back to the third reality, if you're not out of it, then you're going to become part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of like ghosts and things like that, but that could also explain some of that type of activity as well, like ghosts and poltergeists and hauntings and things of that nature.
Hey, I mean, there could even be, getting into like a little bit more spiritual aspect of things, like you have the whole energy release of like consciousness and the soul, and it has to go somewhere. And clearly it's not able to do anything in this physical reality. Like it needs some other form of reality. So, I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if, I guess you could say the afterlife, maybe even possibly heaven, whatever you want to call it, whatever this place is that the energy goes to after you pass away could potentially be the fourth dimension.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. All right, so I'm going to jump back in and we're going to talk about the Montauk Project itself a little bit. So the article says, Apparently, these Montauk Project experiments, which took place right at the base, were participated in by the same man who made the wormhole claims, a 57-year-old Al Bielek. He claims that his name isn't actually Al Bielek, but instead Edward Cameron, one of two brothers who participated in the Philadelphia experiment while in their 20s, and later in life, via the wormhole, participated in more psychic experiments in Montauk. He was able to recover his repressed memories after reading a book about the Montauk Project written by a man named Preston Nichols, who in turn had recovered his own repressed memories to tell the story. Among other things, the various members of the project allegedly worked on a chair that used electromagnets to amplify psychic energy and a psychic association trick called the seeing eye, similar to the experiment Eleven goes through in season 1 of Stranger Things.
Oh, I forgot to throw this detail in, by the way. In the book, by the way, when they start explaining the other realities to people, they call it the all-seeing reality. So I want to throw that one in there just because I found that terminology really interesting, and it also seems to kind of fall in with this.
It's also kind of interesting when you talk about like the all-seeing eye and occult symbolism and like conspiracy and things like that.
It's the fourth dimensional perspective if you're looking at it from that viewpoint.
Well, and that goes back to you saying, you know, kind of like religion or whatever, and people trying to repress these ideas. Isn't that kind of what secret societies have been doing forever, like trying to keep these things occult and hidden? So I think that's kind of interesting.
Translation, just like the priests in Flat World, man. It's a matter of they don't think people can handle the concept of the next reality up, so they just try to keep it a secret so they don't, quote, shatter people's reality. It's that whole thing of thinking you're playing the hero when you're not necessarily playing the hero, because I guess it's a matter of perspective. I mean, maybe some people are a little bit more simple, and if they knew that there was the next step up, they would feel like nothing that they do is relevant at that point. But on the other side, you know, it's that whole thing about keeping secrets from people. There's a lot of people that would be better off knowing that information. So I guess it's kind of a hard line there to pull on whether or not you release specific information. And I'm not trying to, you know, justify anything that the government does necessarily, but, you know, putting yourself in a different perspective and shoes, you know, maybe there is some information that, you know, people just aren't honestly going to be able to handle. Like, I mean, that's a lot of like the UFO stuff. Like,
exactly.
I don't even think it's necessarily always just a government conspiracy on things. I think that there is a huge faction of it that it's like the average person will not be able to fathom this. Like they will, their brains will break. They will end up in a loony asylum. Like,
well, yeah,
they can't do it.
Kind of what people always say about like UFO disclosure. Like if you make this known and, you know, people know that there's all these other things and beings out there, how do you get people to show up to work on Monday and, you know, pay their taxes and get their car inspected and all this piddly shit we have to do here on Earth? So
yeah, you can step out of time, but please go to your rat race job and be materialistic.
Yeah, and pay your property taxes on shit you already own. So, but anyway, so jumping back in, they all claim that these repressed memories were intentionally hidden using coercion by the government as a means of protecting the project's secrecy. Excuse me. Follow the story to the end, and you'll discover more about child abductions, monster summoning, and many more unpleasant claims. It's all murky, and as we said, pretty questionable, considering it's so word of mouth. But if you want to know more, check out Preston Nichols' The Montauk Project Experiments in Time if you'd like a quicker read. There are synopsises and speculation out there, yada, yada, yada. So have you read this book, Shayn, the Montauk Project
I have not.
Experiments in Time? So I read it. I was super jazzed up to read it. You know, I knew kind of the broad strokes of the Montauk Project and all that. And I was like, man, that is awesome. I'm all in. Cannot wait to dive into this. And I fully intended to do an episode of Bizarre Encounters about it. I read the book and came away being like, man, I think this dude's just full of shit. Like it's one of those things where like I was super on board with the concept, and then when I actually like really dug into it, I believed it less and less the further I went on. Like this guy kind of just seems like he's a bit of like an egotistical like glory hound, and like the story that he tells is batshit insane. I mean, he talks about like how this project was being funded by like hidden Nazi gold and all this crazy shit, and it just seems
dude,
impossible.
If you get into my weird perspective of things with the whole connecting stuff with, you know, from World War II going on through all the UFO abduction stuff. I mean, that would almost kind of make sense in a weird way.
The Nazi
it
gold
seems like
is like one of the more believable things, but like this guy it's impossible that one person was involved in all these things and like it just everywhere that this guy claims to be, like it's just not possible. So I mean, I think
when did the book come out, by the way?
Well, all this supposedly happened in the 80s. So I think the book came out in like late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, I was thinking it might have been part of that generation where obviously we've seen this huge flip as far as being able to control a narrative, where back in the day, everybody got it from their straight news source. You could easily control the narrative quickly through the news source. But nowadays, we've gotten to this point where there's just so much information out there. The only way that it seems like you're able to control a narrative is by putting the narrative out there and then throwing a bunch of other crazy shit around it. And they also take advantage of people where they think that they're privy to information. They'll give them some good information, and then they'll give them a bunch of other crazy bullshit, so it ends up flooding it out. So it seems like nowadays, controlling the narrative isn't a matter of hiding the information. It's a matter of putting it out there with so much other ridiculous shit so that people won't believe the real narrative.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think there could be a nugget of truth in this. I mean, MK Ultra and all that kind of stuff and like remote viewing, we know the government was into this weird shit. So
child abductions too, going
exactly.
in with the modern UFO stuff, that children will come back and all of a sudden have these like telepathic abilities. Like maybe it's a continuation of something like this, you know, that they were trying to bring those abilities out in kids. Like I said, it sidelines with the UFO abduction phenomenon.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's very possible that there's a nugget of truth in all this, and like at its very core, a lot of the stuff is pretty easy to believe, especially for weirdos like us. But I mean, the book I think is at best heavily embellished. But anyway, I'll jump back in if you don't have anything else to add right now.
No, sir.
So we've only got like a little bit more in the article, but I do have some closing thoughts as well. So it says, where does it all fit into the Hamptons? Most people probably don't think about this as part of the Hamptons' history. The sealed-off buildings are admittedly spooky, though, and they may mean folks can't go in and see for themselves. But the lore was strong enough for Netflix and the Duffer Brothers, who are from North Carolina, by the way, to use it as a backdrop for the celebrated Stranger Things series. While they later changed the setting to Indiana for aesthetic reasons, the inspiration for the story remains largely in the East End. And true or not, it makes for interesting conversation around a campfire or at your next horror movie night. 'Tis the season, after all.
I believe that weren't they were originally going to call the show Montauk.
They were.
They ended up changing the name.
Yeah, so I think they probably thought they were skirting a little too close, and so they changed the name and the location. But yeah, a lot of what goes on is based on, you know, these supposed psychic experiments that were going on with these children at this base, supposedly. And according to the book, supposedly the Montauk Project stemmed from the Philadelphia experiment. It was like a continuation of that work, like we talk about all the time. The government never really shuts down a program. They just call it something else and continue the work. But anyway, all this was conducted, like we said, at the Montauk Air Force Station, which is also known as Camp Hero in Montauk, New York, which is like on the tip of Long Island. Again, popularized through this series of books by Preston Nichols. He talks about how there's like mind control and weather control and time travel experiments going on. And supposedly they like even contacted extraterrestrials and exchanged technology with them. But this is kind of interesting, I thought. Supposedly in 1983, this hole in like space-time was ripped open to 1943, and supposedly they were able to like go back to the Philadelphia experiment and all kinds of craziness. But in 1983, a large hairy creature supposedly came through one of these time tunnels and like destroyed their labs and equipment and killed a bunch of the scientists, and then the program was shut down. So a lot of that is kind of where the Stranger Things corollaries come through, like the Demogorgon tearing up the lab and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's just a little bit of background about the Montauk Project. Again, tried to do an episode on this one a couple times, and I couldn't make myself do it. So I thought it was kind of fun to touch on it with this episode.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, especially if you said that you don't think there's a lot of bullshit to the book. It's like maybe it'd be fun to try to dive through it and kind of break it down a little bit. But I'm convinced that books like that, man, that was probably the age of when they were starting to test out the whole concept of obviously the internet. The concept of the internet, was already existing at that point. So they knew that inevitably it was going to become a problem. So that may have been one of these first tests of, releasing information with a bunch of other bullshit tied to it. But also bringing it back into the show, I'm pretty convinced that Stranger Things is one of those shows that's intended to be, I don't want to say like soft disclosure, but I guess you could kind of say it that way. A matter of not necessarily like bringing people to the fact of these concepts, but also trying to explain the knowledge of how these other realities could possibly function to people. It's like a whole rabbit hole conspiracy, but I don't know if you've dived into like the Francis Bacon thing, linking with Shakespeare and everything like that, and the Rosicrucians. But just to kind of quick sum it up without getting into a whole 2-hour spat about it, part of the whole conspiracy theory was that Kevin Bacon, Francis Bacon. Yeah, exactly. Was writing these stories and was trying to give them to Shakespeare so that he could bring them to the common man, because if he was the one writing them, like they wouldn't have the same push behind them for like
theories
the
that
average
like Shakespeare
person.
wasn't even a real person, and this is all basically just like an illusion and a pen name made for Francis Bacon.
Yeah, see, that's one of the theories. The other theory is that he basically just took a random person and basically said, you're going to be the person who puts the face in front of all of my work. And so the whole concept behind that was that, getting into the whole Rosicrucian aspect of things, they were trying to like raise the intelligence level of the average person. So they knew that the average person isn't going to go and read some like, giant fucking scripture book. They didn't even have the ability to really read back then like that, most people. But they could go and watch a cheap movie at a theater because they had like the penny seats and all that kind of stuff. And they could actually start to expand their mind into a more philosophical aspect of things. So obviously times have changed. The whole philosophical aspect of things is a little bit different as far as we're kind of getting into this more sci-fi future. But I think Stranger Things is another example of something almost like the conspiracy behind the Shakespeare plays, that I think shows like this are intended not just for soft disclosure, but to like start bending people's minds into the concepts of how some of these sci-fi things could potentially work.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, with things like the Hadron Collider and, us knowing more about string theory and wormholes, people are kind of fucking trained. If some weird creature comes through this wormhole, we've seen this in movies and on TV, and it's not going to be this crazy ass concept. Kind of the same way with like people said, like the sci-fi movies of like the 50s and 60s did with like aliens and UFOs and things like that. So, I mean, it kind of seems a motif we're coming back to time and time again. We're moving kind of away from, as a society, the extraterrestrial idea and like little green men coming down in their spaceship and these more like other dimensions, other planes, other realities type thing. And this could be a step in kind of shifting that public perception from extraterrestrials to ultra terrestrials,
And I mean, that's universal across the table. Like, I was just listening to, shout out to Our Big Dumb Mouth, really enjoyed that show. But Midnight Mike was talking about the new Sasquatch movie that just came out with like David Paulides and everything. And it seems like with most of these big Sasquatch movies that are coming out now, it's not flesh and blood anymore. They're all talking about this interdimensional concept. So it's like universal across the board that if it's the paranormal, if it's extraterrestrials, if it's Sasquatch, like everything seems to be shifting over to this interdimensional concept. And even within the Sasquatch community, I know there's still always going to be those diehard flesh and blood people out there, but it seems like the majority of the group is kind of getting more into this interdimensional concept of Sasquatch. Maybe not necessarily like coherently like I have fucking superpowers, but more of like them stepping in and out of reality just as like a natural function that they do, and not like they have some type of like, woo-woo powers. It's just a fourth dimensional being would go back and forth and it would look like it was magic, but it's just normal to them,
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I fall on the whole most cryptids really, like we've said about the Mothman. I don't necessarily think this thing was like a harbinger of doom. I don't necessarily think he was like trying to warn these people. I think it was kind of just like this animal that got stuck here. And I think Sasquatch is the same way. Yeah, I don't necessarily think he has these woo-woo powers, but it is kind of like a woo-woo type situation that allows Sasquatch to be here.
I mean, that would completely explain why these things don't seem to have changed all through time, is maybe because they're existing outside of time and they're stepping into time, and we're looking at it from a linear perspective, but they're not linear. Like, you know, maybe one of the Sasquatch sightings that happened in the 50s and one Sasquatch sighting that happened recently, it's the same Sasquatch. It was within the same, quote, day for them. It's just a matter of they're outside of our perspective. So it's just step in, step out, and they're appearing at these different points.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, like I said, if you entertain these type of thoughts, it clears up a lot of the critiques and questions that most people have about cryptozoology. Oh, why haven't we ever found a carcass, and what do these things eat, and what about their breeding population? Like, a lot of that stuff you don't have to worry about at that point.
Also explains the blurry pictures if their particles on a molecular level are working totally different than ours. That's why you can't capture a picture of these things, is because they're not something that exists in this reality.
Yeah,
you know?
and I mean, footprint trails disappear. Like, you can basically explain away most of the critiques of Bigfoot and other cryptids if you just allow yourself, like I said, to entertain the idea that there could be something just legitimately bizarre going on.
I feel like that's more fathomable than actually there being woo-woo powers, because it seems like a lot of the stuff that we've kind of discovered through time that start off as woo-woo, once we have an understanding of it, it's not really woo-woo anymore. And I know I've said this a million times for Sasquatch, but I think all these woo-woo powers are just a lot more natural, but they're natural to this thing that we have no idea or understanding of fully. So they look like it's conducting magic, but it's not. It's just doing what it naturally does.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like we talk about all the time. If, you know, somebody from 100 years ago was plopped down into our society with iPhones and electric cars and whatever, they'd think we were all fucking wizards. So, I mean, one person's technology is another person's magic or woo-woo. So, I mean, makes perfect sense and goes right along with a lot of things we talk about on the show.
And speaking of magic and woo-woo, that's another great transition into our next topic here. So, got to play the transition music. If it wants to play. Apparently it doesn't want to play.
Yep. There you go.
So, this is one of those really, really weird stories that I am absolutely shocked I have not heard it on any other podcast as far as like our realm of thinking goes. I ended up listening to are you familiar with Dave and Chuck the Freak? Is that something that pops up over in your area, that radio show?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's maybe like a Canadian/Michigan local thing. But anyways, just some local radio DJs. They talk about weird, funny news stories and everything. But this one totally went past all the community. So I won't even give a preface. Just listen to this shit and you're going to be mind blown.
All right.
Talk about soft disclosure, since we were kind of getting into that a bit earlier. So
Tom Brady has said his dog Junie is a clone of his family's old dog, Pit Bull Mix.
Pause it real quick.
The cloning was
This was on my list of potential topics that I wanted to talk about on the show, and I thought it had been too long since it dropped to talk about it, so I'm glad you did this.
Dude, and I have not seen it pop up anywhere else. Like, I was like, oh, dude I got to talk about this before somebody else does, and nobody's brought it up.
I saw it on literally the front page of ESPN.com. Like,
dude,
ESPN is reporting on this, so I'll let you start the video over so our listeners can see what we're actually talking about. But yes, front page ESPN.com reported on this.
Dude, and like I said, just a radio show talking about this. Nobody in our communities talked about it, but it just went right over. Like, it seemed like nobody even talked about this. Like, I saw the story, and I haven't heard anybody mention it since. Just soft disclosure, man. I'll restart the video.
I'm so glad you did
his
this.
dog Junie is a clone of his family's old dog Lua, a pit bull mix who died in 2023. The cloning was done by Colossal Biosciences, a biotech company Brady himself invests in. Scientists collected a blood sample from his beloved pit bull mix prior to her death, Brady said in a Colossal press release. Colossal has been in the news a lot. They're the startup that's working to de-extinct woolly mammoths, revive the Tasmanian...
I just want to throw this in, by the way, that this video is from CNN also.
So these are like legitimate news sources reporting on this shit. This is not, harebrained schemes from weirdos like us.
Yeah, this isn't like the Daily Inquirer or nothing. Like, this is legit.
Yeah. Bring back the direwolf. Brady isn't the only celebrity who's cloned a pet. Paris Hilton used a similar process to clone her Chihuahua, Diamond Baby, which went missing in 2022, into 2 puppies. Hilton, by the way, is also an investor in Colossal. Pet cloning has become increasingly popular among wealthy and high-profile owners. Barbra Streisand famously cloned her dog Samantha after she died in 2017, and now has 2 dogs, Miss Violet and Miss Scarlet, derived from Samantha's DNA. And Margot L. Pritzker, a member of the billionaire Pritzker family, cloned her late dog Jake. Animal welfare groups warn that cloning pets or species isn't simply a miracle shortcut. Success rates remain low, health problems are frequent, and what emerges is never truly a duplicate of the original. Adoption, they say, remains the more ethical route. The announcement about Junie came in tandem with Colossal's announcement of its acquisition of Viagen, a company that claims to be the global leader in animal cloning for pets and horses, and the ones who cloned Hilton, Streisand, and Pritzker's dogs. Another big-name investor in Colossal is the filmmaker Peter Jackson, who did the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Tom Brady.
Dude, and then all these celebrities that are just connected to this, man. Like, this is like an underground network that nobody is talking about, dude. All these guys have cloned dogs. And what's the interest in that? Why would all these people be investing? What's the next step? Think about it.
I have so many thoughts about this. Yeah, like you said, I mean, if this is out there in the open and all these celebrities are cloning their pets, and
just soft disclosure, nonchalant, like, oh,
we
yeah,
started
they got
cloning
cloned
the
dogs.
sheep in like 1995 or whatever. Like, what level of this are we really at if like they're straight up telling us this on ESPN and CNN that they're doing this? So yeah, like you said, these wealthy people are, you know, looking for the fountain of youth, like recloning themselves, whatever, and what could possibly go wrong? I mean, it talked about in the video how basically the same company is trying to de-extinct woolly mammoths. I think we have a whole series of movies about why that's probably not a good idea, but I'll still go to the amusement park if they open one. But
just don't add frog genetics or anything else weird, man.
But no,
if it has adaptive abilities, don't add it.
This story is crazy to me, and like you said, I can't believe that more people aren't talking about this.
Like I said, it's a matter of like soft disclosure. Like they just push it out and so nonchalant. But it's like you have one step and then there's a second step. So considering this came from all the main news sources, it's the matter of soft disclosure. They're going to talk about the aspect of the cloning company itself. But I bet you if you start looking into it, a lot of these people that are investing in these dog cloning facilities are probably also investing in places that are doing research into consciousness, and possibly even some of the ones that are doing those like dream helmets where they're able to like manipulate consciousness. Because I feel like this is a two-step part. And if you really start diving into these people, they're going to be looking at this cloning process and they're going to be looking at consciousness, because the end intention, of course, is going to be you have an empty clone and you transfer your consciousness over and you have the infinite, you know, fountain of
and
youth
you
at
live
that
forever.
point.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a step-by-step for soft disclosure on this, man. Because this is going to be one of those things that, you know, if you're rich, you're a celebrity, you have full access to it. But the rest of us, dude, we'll never have access to even touch this stuff.
You know, I think I'm fine with that. I don't like living that much now. I'm not sure if I want to live forever.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. I mean, I don't know if you get into... I mean, depending on how you kind of view the whole spiritual realm of things, I feel like no matter what pantheon you'd kind of view that through, whether you're Christian or whatever, you know, I feel like that would be almost like breaking the system or rigging the system. So in turn, you know, you may not be going to the place that you want to go after this this cycle stops.
Well,
you know?
at very, very least, it's like playing God and messing with nature at that point, you know?
I mean, you also have to take into consideration that just because you can transfer your consciousness over to something else doesn't take away the fact that there are going to be some random events that happen. So, you know, you break the cycle, you're out of the cycle, you live through 3 lives, and then one day you get hit by a car. What happens to your consciousness after that, man? Because if there's a creator, you probably pissed him off at that point.
Well, and what did the prophet Dr. Ian Malcolm say? It's like you were too worried about whether you could do something to worry about if you should, and you're like a kid who stumbled upon their dad's gun or whatever, which is like my favorite line in the book. But anyway,
life finds a way.
Yep, that was a good one.
But yeah, I want to make sure that we touch base on this one at least a little bit before, well, I guess at this point, before it completely gets swept under the rug. But I'm personally going to be keeping an eye out for these little things because I kind of want to put this together because I feel like this is going to be a narrative that slowly gets spun over the next couple of years until all of a sudden something big gets released.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that one up. Like I said, I wanted to talk about it on the show. I just thought it had been too long since the story dropped. But yeah, that was a great discussion. So thank you for bringing that one.
Absolutely. So, of course, as usual, we always have to have our funny article at the end. So, no different than any other time. I definitely have one of those lined up and ready for you guys. So, I don't know if you had heard this story, but somebody recently, semi-recently, this was back in October, blamed a cryptid for a car crash. So, I have a local news story on this one, and we can definitely get into it. But driver blames crash on Chupacabra. Now faces felony.
Come here, little fuck! Come here!
Oh.
Everybody knows you never go full retard.
Yeah, this guy definitely went full retard. But getting into the story, A Bedford man was arrested early Sunday morning following a single vehicle crash that left his truck overturned and led to charges of operating a vehicle while intoxicated, of course. The driver, Caleb M. Sowers, 21, reportedly failed sobriety tests and offered an unusual explanation for the wreck. And of course, you got to have this awesome mugshot up of this individual. The incident occurred on October 12th around 1 a.m. when Lawrence County Sheriff Department deputies C. Pruitt K. Long and M. Martin responded to a crash near the intersection of Patton Hill Road and Vista Drive. Dispatch advised the respondent deputies that a third-party caller reported a single vehicle crash involving a 2001 tan Chevy S10 that landed on its side across the roadway. The caller also noted that the driver, later identified as Caleb Sowers, seemed intoxicated and was attempting to discourage the witness from calling 911. Of course, it was the fucking Chupacabra, man. It wasn't me. What are you talking about? Upon arrival, Deputy Pruitt located Sowers sitting on a limestone rock near the overturned vehicle. When the deputy began speaking with Sowers, he immediately detected the odor of alcohol, noting the driver's eyes were glassy and his speech was slurred. Sowers quickly admitted to drinking and losing control of his truck while driving up Patton Road. When Deputy Pruitt attempted to administer a field sobriety test, Sowers was reportedly uncooperative. I don't even know what that says. There it is. Affidavit states that after being asked to look at the officer's eyes for a check, Sowers failed to put his phone down. When the deputy took his phone, Sowers grabbed it promptly the deputy to attempt to stand up. Sowers then went to his knees and lay down. Deputies Long and Pruitt had to roll Sowers onto his stomach in order to place his hands behind his back before putting him in handcuffs. While sitting him back on the rock, Sowers was advised the deputy would check his eyes, to which Sowers allegedly reported that the deputy did not need to check his eyes because he was drunk.
At least he's a real straight shooter.
Yeah.
I mean,
at least he's being honest. So you don't need to check my eyes, man. I'm drunk.
Everybody knows you never go full retard.
And as I said, this guy definitely did that. Sowers continued to refuse instruction and repeatedly interrupted Deputy Pruitt's attempt to read his Miranda rights. Because, of course, if you can't hear the rights, nothing is irrelevant. So if you just keep interrupting the officer, then you don't read the rights read to you, and that's what's going to work in a court of law, right? Deputy Martin eventually read Sowers his Miranda rights and implied consent advisement while he was secured in the patrol car. Sowers stated that he understood his rights and agreed to a blood draw. Sowers initially claimed that he had consumed 3 shots around 11 p.m. at a friend's house. However, Deputy Martin noted that Sowers had previously told EMS staff that he had been at a local bar, Shorty's. When confronted, Sowers stated he thought he was at a friend's house.
maybe Shorty was his friend. Did they think about that?
Shorty's my best friend. What are you talking about, man? Sowers was transported to UI Health Benefit Hospital for medical clearance and blood
I think
draw.
You skipped the best part.
Oh, when asked what caused him to crash, the affidavit notes Sowers stated that a Chupacabra ran out in front of him.
When the fuck did we get ice cream?
Sowers was transported to UI Health Bedford Hospital for medical clearance and blood draw, which was used to confirm his blood alcohol content. He was subsequently transported to the Lawrence County Jail and booked on a felony charge of operating a vehicle with a blood content level of 0.5% or greater. The vehicle was towed from the scene. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. This article is based on information, blah, 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 blah. But at no point, by the way, did the officers ever go and actually look for a Chupacabra. Like, I know this guy may have been intoxicated, but maybe there actually was a Chupacabra, man. I'm just going to throw that one out there.
I mean, this guy was like completely fucking honest about everything else. So why would we?
That's what I'm saying.
Why would we doubt?
I'm
his
drunk as fuck and a
story?
Chupacabra jumped out. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If he's admitting that he is drunk, maybe you should take some validity into the fact that maybe this dude did see a fucking Chupacabra.
Yeah, I'm lit. Yeah, I thought I was at my friend's house, and yeah, Chupacabra ran out in front of me. I mean, like I said, this guy's a real straight shooter. I think we should believe him.
Shorty is my friend, man. He's not lying, right? Technically, he wasn't. He was telling the truth.
I mean, and looking at this guy's mugshot,
I'll bring it back up so everybody can see this guy's mug.
If I've ever seen anybody who looks like they drive a tan 2001 Chevrolet S10, it is this guy.
And he definitely looks like he might see a Chupacabra in what state was this again?
Colorado? Is that what it was? Yeah.
Colorado? Yeah, which Has there ever been any type of a Chupacabra sighting in Colorado? No, I'm pretty sure that mainly stays to Texas and Mexico.
Well,
but...
there has been now.
Well, maybe you should have said Sasquatch. I think he would have been a little bit better off with that detail.
No, Sasquatch is too mainstream. That's not believable. He had to get like one of the weird emo cryptids, like Chupacabra. That's a deep cut right there.
Yeah, Sasquatch is too obvious.
Yeah.
If I use that one, they're going to know I'm bullshitting. I got to use one that's off the wall. What am I going to go with? Fucking Chupacabra. I mean, in all fairness, though, if you're driving a truck, I'm pretty sure you could probably blast a Chupacabra with no damage to your truck. So maybe his best course of action would have been just to plow straight through this motherfucker.
No, it probably like what actually happened was like a dog just ran out in front of him or a fox or something, and this guy was just like so fucking out of his mind he thought it was a Chupacabra.
Oh shit, it's a Chupacabra! It was a wolf with mange.
What do we always say in cryptid or alien sightings? A lot of times the people aren't trying to do hoaxes, and they really believe what they saw. And I think Homeboy really thought he saw a Chupacabra. So
I think when this guy gets out of jail, somebody has to hit him up for an interview to at least get his perspective from a podcaster's angle. So maybe we can get a little bit more information out. We should, yeah. We'll try to contact this guy. I don't know when he's supposed to get out, but it feels like he might be there for at least a little bit. Maybe we can contact him next year around October for the anniversary of his epic fail, and maybe we can give him the opportunity to try to redeem himself, like they used to do on Tosh Point Out.
we'll start like a GoFundMe for his bond.
We need to have a conversation with this guy. He needs to be redeemed.
Justice for Caleb.
And that Chupacabra, because maybe he blasted that fucker. Somebody should have went and checked, man. Rest in peace, Chupi.
Justice for Chupi. All right, guys. And on that note, you can catch our next live show of Bizarre Inquiries on January 8th. That's, again, a Thursday. It'll be roughly 7:15 Eastern Time on the Bizarre Reality Media. See, I'm starting to get the hang of it. YouTube channel. So you guys be sure to join us for that. Submit questions, inquiries, anything you want us to talk about. And if anyone would like to get in touch with us for any other reason, Shane, tell them how they can do that.
Depending on which show you guys are listening to, you guys can always get a hold of us through our emails, which are bizarreencounters@outlook.com and inquiriesofourealitypodcast@outlook.com. You guys can also get a hold of us through social media, same ways, depending on whatever show you guys are listening through. You guys can also get a hold of us through the submission forms, which are up at the top of our link trees. And the last way that you guys can get a hold of us is by calling or texting the Bizarre Reality Media hotline. You guys can call or text that 24/7, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you happen to miss that, it is available down in the show notes.
If you guys are interested in supporting the show and all the hard work, you can.
Always go and check out the show on Patreon with 2 tiers available, ad-free / early access and full access. And as I usually end up saying around this time of year, I've got some new stuff I'm going to be trying over on the Patreon. So if anybody's interested in checking that out and seeing all the new stuff that I'm going to try to offer, there are 7-day free trials available, of course.
And you guys can check out the merch store with t-shirts starting at the absurdly low and strangely specific price of just $15.68 plus shipping.
Whoa, yes, just like he said. And around this holiday season, what not a better time to go and rep some awesome merch for hopefully one of your guys' favorite podcasts. And I know that times are tough out there, especially with the holiday season, of course. But if you guys would like to support the show in some other ways, one of the best ways that you guys can do that is by leaving a review anywhere that you guys happen to listen to podcasts. And of course, we will read it on the show, give you guys a big shout out. And as we usually say, 1 and 5 stars only. 5 stars, we will give you some love. 1 star, we're going to ridicule you, but that's part of the fun.
Well, if it's a 1 star, they might also be correct. You guys can also follow the show on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And, you know, just do all the Facebook and Insta chats and all the internet things. You guys know how the internet works. Just do it.
All you Gen Zs, just do your Gen Z thing.
Yeah.
And then you guys could also share the show through word of mouth with friends, family, enemies, anybody that you think might actually check out the show. Grassword Roots is probably one of the absolute best ways for these shows to continue to grow.
And you can catch live shows and video content on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and also Rumble, Twitch, and that's it, right? Rumble and Twitch, all those things.
Rumble,
I don't know what they are.
Yep, YouTube, Rumble, and Twitch,
Okay.
all the fun streaming platforms.
All right.
But every single thing that we mentioned is all available down in the show description, so you guys can access all that stuff quick and easy. And as usual, I have been the one that they refer to as Shane, a.k.a. the original Shane Squatch. And alongside me, as usual, I have
the big, bad Boo Daddy, who is one day going to clone himself like Tom Brady's dog, Orin Felix.
And just like we tend to do on the show, like we like to bring up things that are definitely in that realm, we always stay bizarre. So just like us, my friends, you guys should do the same and always remain and stay bizarre.
Bizarre?
So bang bang, skeet skeet.
I am delivered. Everybody knows you got a little foot time. Whoa. Come here, you little fuck.
I don't like men's no more.
When the fuck did we get ice cream? When the fuck did we get ice cream?
Grab his dick and twist it.